In a prison in Thailand, Lee is making a drawing by using paint from the wall mixed with water and feather tips that he keeps hidden in a book. He also makes a fake stamp that Lee puts on an envelope. Meanwhile, a guard is asking prisoners if they have any mail to send home, although he only takes letters from those who can bribe him. When he reaches Lee's cell, he's distracted by another prisoner throwing a fit, and Lee throws his envelope in the guard's bag. After the guard is gone, Lee thanks the other prisoner, revealing that he misbehaved as a distraction. At that moment, a guard comes to take Lee out of his cell, saying that he's been extradited to Hong Kong. Lee travels with Detective Ho in a convoy and watches everyone carefully. At the police station, detectives go over the details of an old case. 2 years ago, 7 armored truck guards were killed on a Canadian highway. 4 months later, the Golden Triangle Merlin Gorilla was attacked, resulting in 82 dead and 157 injured. Last year, there was a murder-arson at a printing mill. Later, at a hotel, a cop and an art dealer were found dead. All these murders are connected to an international counterfeit syndicate, and most of its members were killed. Only 2 survivors remain, Lee and his boss known as Painter. His identity and location are a total mystery, so the police only have one blurry photo of him in Canada. Poe asks Lee for information about Painter, but Lee is afraid that he'll get killed if he talks, and starts crying. Suddenly, an explosion blows up the office, bringing the ceiling down on Lee and the cops. However, this is just Lee explaining what Painter is capable of. Poe isn't scared, so Lee starts freaking out, asking to be sent back to jail. A detective takes him to a cell and punches him. Moments later, Lee is given some food, which has a sedative that knocks him out. The cops use the chance to get hair, skin, saliva, and blood samples. When Lee wakes up, he's taken back to Ho's office. A detective explains that the samples match the shooting at the hotel, so Lee will be charged with murder. Lee freaks out as he claims that the evidence is fake and says they can't scare him into talking. Ho tries to threaten Lee, but she's interrupted by the officer, who informs her of an important meeting. In another office, Ho discovers that famous artist Yuan and her lawyers want to bail Lee out. The lawyers point out that the evidence isn't very good, and they can tell Lee is being set up, but the police still refuse to let him go. Instead, they offer a deal. If Yuan convinces Lee to talk about Painter, they'll release him. In the interrogation room, Yuan tells Lee about the deal. He reminds her that talking would put them in danger, but Yuan wants the cops to catch Painter because he killed her fiancé. Lee agrees to talk just to help her, so he sits in front of the camera and starts sharing a story. In 1985, Lee meets Yuan in Vancouver. They're both talented painters trying to have a career, but nobody wants to buy their art. A decade later, they barely have any money to survive, and their home loses power because of unpaid bills. Desperate for real income, Lee goes to an art gallery and makes a deal to create counterfeit paintings. When he goes home, he overhears Yuan talking to her manager. The man admires Yuan's creative art, but insults Lee's, saying he only copies other artists. However, Yuan doesn't want him to represent her if he doesn't take Lee as well. That night, Lee turns on the lights, revealing he paid the bill because a gallery has bought all his paintings. As part of the deal, he's gotten a solo show for Yuan next month. Sometime later, Yuan goes to the gallery workshop to visit Lee and discovers that his new job is forging art, not creating it. She thinks he doesn't give his skills enough credit, but Lee has given up on regular art and explains that doing these forgeries is actually thrilling. Yuan says she loves him, but she's very disappointed in him. Yuan's art show lasts many days, but Lee doesn't show up until the last one. He's annoyed because she's hung up one of his paintings along with hers without his permission. Yuan claims some collectors are interested in it, but Lee knows that she sold everything except that one. At that moment, Painter starts mocking Lee's painting for imitating the classic art masters. Guests laugh, but Yuan throws a drink in his face and kicks him out. Lee follows him to apologize, only for Painter to reveal he bought one of Lee's copies. He made a scene on purpose to talk to him in private. They go to a bar, and Lee talks about his forging techniques that help his art look old. Painter explains he's in the forging business and wants Lee to work with him, so he leaves him his card. In the gallery, Yuan is arguing with her manager. He's angry that she ruined her show by making a scene, and that they can't declare a total sold out because Lee's painting is the only one left. Suddenly, Lee enters the gallery and proceeds to burn his painting. The next day, Lee contacts Painter, who welcomes him to the team before giving him his first job to recreate a $100 bill. Lee freaks out, refusing to do something so dangerous. Painter promises that the job won't be linked to him and shares some secrets to gain his trust. His name is Fuquang, and he comes from 3 generations of counterfeits from Hong Kong. Nobody in his family has ever gone to jail, and they always play by the rules. His team only does distribution, and his buyers are powerful people who keep him protected. However, Lee still refuses to participate. When Lee gets home, he discovers that Yuan is moving to the USA. This makes him change his mind. So, moments later, he's on a plane to Thailand with Fuquang, who promises to help Lee get Yuan back. Then he shares some details about the job. The US government released a new dollar bill design with more details that even include micro-printed words, which has made it difficult to forge. Lee says they'll need a more meticulous printing plate, so Fuquang introduces him to plate maker Yam. The team also has Administrator Wu and brothers Sham and Bobby for logistics and security. Wu mentions that they'll need color-shifting ink, and Yam wants starch-free paper to trick the counterfeit detector pens. Its ink turns purple on normal paper, but yellow on starch-free paper from bills. Meanwhile, he wants Lee to concentrate on the watermark, which is made from the fibers between the paper. In Thailand, the team settles in an abandoned workshop. Lee spends several days practicing the details from the dollar bills, from the letters to the strands of hair. Eventually, he achieves a perfect result. One night during dinner, the team looks at a Chinese painting and bets money on its authenticity. Most of the team thinks it's fake, but Lee thinks it's real and even tells them about the technique behind it. Chinese artists can cut up their paintings into layers, and yet the paint will be identical in all of them. Lee wins the bet, and Fukong explains that they'll use that method for their bills. They'll push the pattern with an iron drum before the pull pardons. Once it's hard, the pattern will become the watermark, and they'll sandwich it between two other layers. Yam points out that they can put the security thread in the middle layer too. For the next few weeks, the team works on the precision of the details. They mix colors to find the right shade of paint, and Yam uses all his knowledge to make a plate that paints with a pen. Thousandth of a millimeter precision. It takes them 2 months and 17 prototypes to reach the perfect one. Lee enjoys working with Yam and uses the chance to ask questions about Fukong. Yam confirms that nobody in the family was ever arrested, although Fukong's father argued with some Russians over money and was killed. Yam shows Lee a picture of his daughters, explaining that they think he sells antiques. They still are missing the paper, but W couldn't find anything that passes the pen test. Fukong announces they'll solve this by traveling to Eastern Europe. It turns out they use starch-free paper to print phone books because there it's not regulated like in the USA. First, they stop at an auction to buy an industrial printer. Then Fukong puts on a disguise to pretend to be a disabled man and claims to work for a charity that prints educational comic books. He talks to the boss of a phone book manufacturing company, who at first refuses to sell to them. However, he changes his mind when Lee tells him this is for the kids in Africa. Soon, the printer and all the paper are in the workshop. In just a matter of minutes, they manage to print a realistic dollar bill. They only need to fix the shade of the ink. Sometime later, Lee returns to Vancouver to drop off his key, leaving it on a desk because he refuses to meet Yuan. On the drive back, Fukong calls Lee a coward and points out that Yuan's very successful show is named after the painting Lee burned. An argument ensues, and Fukong stops the car to yell at Lee, saying that giving up on Yuan is giving up on himself. Suddenly, Fukong leaves the car and puts on a mask before pulling out a gun. On his seat, Lee finds a bulletproof vest and a second gun. There's an armored car in the middle of the road, and when a guard sees the guys, he opens fire. Lee panics and puts on the vest while San shoots back, quickly killing one of the guards. However, he fails to bring down the others, so one of his men has to shoot them from a distance. He also shoots the tires of the armored car. The rest of the team shows up in a vehicle, and together, they overpower the security employees. After they tie them up, they open the armored car and steal several cans of ink. Another guard is hiding behind the cans, and Lee freezes at the sight of his gun. Fukong pushes him out of the way and is thrown back by a bullet. Furious, he starts shooting repeatedly to kill the guy, ignoring his men when they tell him to let it go. Before they leave, Fukong blows up the armored car with all the employees inside. At the workshop, Lee shows his disapproval of killing for their business and says he'll leave the team after figuring out how to make ink with the right shade. Fukong throws his glass on the ground in fury, but sarcastically tells Lee to do whatever he wants. Afterward, Fukong travels all over the world to deliver suitcases of fake money to some of the biggest crime lords. Soon, the team has huge piles of real money to enjoy. Meanwhile, Lee finds a car with the exact shade of green they need. He acquires the paints that the car factory uses and manages to mix a tone that works perfectly with their paper. Now they won't have to steal paint again. One day, the team is visited by people sent by a Thai crime boss known as the General. Fukong has a drink with the General's right hand and his counterfeit expert Cao Qing, who admires the quality of the bill's art. At that moment, Lee walks down the corridor and accidentally trips, spilling green paint all over the glass door. As he looks up, he shares a look with Cao Qing. After the visitors leave, Fukong yells at Lee, but he calms down when he realizes that they've perfected the paint. The next day, Fukong tells Lee that he bought a resort under his name so he can retire with Yuan. They travel to a compound in the middle of nowhere and meet with the General. Fukong hands Lee a detonator, telling him to hide it until he gives him a signal. While walking around the compound, Lee is terrified to see guards shooting civilians. The General tries to make a good deal with Fukong, claiming that he used to be good friends with his father. However, Fukong knows that the General hired the Russians who killed his father and reveals he came here for revenge. He opens his jacket to reveal some explosives and tells Lee to drop the detonator. At first, Lee refuses, but since the guards are threatening to shoot, he has no choice but to drop it anyway. A car explodes near them, destroying the room, but failing to kill anyone. The general tries to run away, so Fukong shoots him in the leg. A few guards surround him, but Fukong fights them and takes their guns to kill them. More guards appear outside and take the general away, while starting a shootout with Fukong. After lots of wasted bullets, the guards throw a grenade. Fukong rolls out of the room right before it explodes. Then Fukong manages to kill several guards and ends up getting shot in the shoulder. When more men come after him, Shum starts bombing the compound from afar, destroying most of the buildings and killing most of the army. Fukong gets bigger guns and starts shooting down the survivors, not stopping even when he's wounded again. Unfortunately, more soldiers keep coming, so Fukong is forced to hide behind a pile of bags. At that moment, the rest of the team bursts into the compound in a jeep, throwing grenades to cause more destruction. In the woods, Shum is trying to run away, but the soldiers surround him and open fire, causing him to lose his arm. This fallen hand loses its grip on a grenade, and it blows up, killing all the guards with one explosion. At the compound, Lee notices that Cao Qing is caught on fire. He runs into a burning building just to put out the flames with his jacket. Then, he carries her out. Fukong and the team keep shooting guards until the general appears in a truck to fire back. Bobby pushes Fukong and is knocked out instead. Then Fukong makes a risky jump to shoot the truck driver, followed by a shot at the tires. This causes the truck to crash, and the general finally dies. Fukong takes the general's ring and allows Lee to bring Cao Qing with them. On their way out, the last explosion finishes destroying the area. Afterward, the team stays hidden for a year in the Golden Triangle. Cao Qing is taken to the hospital to heal her injuries, and Fukong gets her a fake passport with Yuan's name. Lee doesn't approve, but Fukong ignores him. Sometime later at an art gallery, Fukong buys all of Yuan's paintings and tells Lee he'll send them to the resort so he can impress her. However, Lee thinks Yuan won't like receiving dirty money. When Lee starts to scold him, they're interrupted by some reporters following Yuan to ask her about her engagement to her manager. The news upset Lee, so he leaves. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong police calls Wing Chit, a counterfeit expert from the Canadian Federal Police. Ho has been trying to find the gang that has been putting fake dollar bills in the market all over the world. So, Wing Chit will help her. Together, they start watching an antique store that belongs to Yam. Later, Ho and Wing Chit pretend to be potential buyers and start talking to various brokers until they're invited to a boat party that the infamous painter is supposed to attend. However, they're disappointed to discover that painter has sent Shaman Bobby instead of coming himself. Wing Chit pretends to be aggressively offended, and the brothers bring out their guns just to test him. When they tease Ho, Wing Chit immediately defends her and proves he's cool by jumping into the water with her. The brothers agree he's trustworthy, so W appears on another boat and throws a bag with a phone, telling Wing Chit to wait for a call. At the same time, in a yacht, Fukong argues with Lee because he's discovered that he's leaving with Cao Qing without his approval. A furious Fukong grabs Lee and seems he's about to attack, but he's interrupted by the team announcing that the new clients are ready. They tell him that these clients are vouched for by one of Yam's antique clients, causing Fukong to remember Wing Chit hanging outside the store. The team rushes back to the workshop, and Yam learns that one of his clients set him up. Yam begs for mercy, but Fukong shoots him to death anyway. Lee freaks out, and Fukong tries to shoot him too. However, Lee grabs the gun and the shot misses. Fukong punches him instead. Afterward, the team burns down the workshop to get rid of all evidence. Later in the city, Ho puts trackers in Wing Chit's watch and phone before he meets with the painter, unaware that the gang knows they're cops. After he leaves, Ho looks at his lighter and finds a note asking her out. In a hotel, Wing Chit meets with the team, and Fukong tries to sell him the plate instead of the forged bills, saying he's retiring from the business. Since Wing Chit turns him down, Fukong asks Lee to kill him. Since Lee hesitates, Wing Chit jumps on him to try to get the gun, only for Fukong to shoot him down. Then Fukong gets angry because Lee continues to be a coward. He drags him to the bedroom and reveals that he's captured Yuan and her fiancé, who are tied up and blindfolded. Fukong tells Lee to kill the manager. However, Lee points the gun at him instead. Fukong knows he won't dare and proceeds to kill the manager, so Lee runs to rescue Yuan. The whole team opens fire while the duo takes cover. Suddenly, Cao Qing shows up and stabs Hua from behind, causing her to shoot a chandelier that crashes on the table. Then she uses Hua's gun to kill the brothers, but Fuksong manages to hide behind the door. When Fukong offers Lee for his freedom, Lee finally is brave enough to shoot Fukong in the chest several times. Lee doesn't want to abandon Yuan. However, Cao Qing convinces him they're in danger, so they leave together. Afterward, Lee and Cao Qing hide in the resort. They follow the news and learn that the police didn't find Fukong's body. Also, Yam's whole family was killed. One day, Lee informs Cao Qing he's leaving because Yuan will hold a memorial for her fiancé, and he's afraid that Fukong will attack her there. In the city, he tries to pay for a cafe with forged money, but the cops surround him and beat him up. When Lee is dragged to the police van, he sees Fukong nearby, waving a flyer for Yuan's show. In the present, Lee finishes his story and helps a cop make sketches of Cao Qing and Fukong. Ho grants him bail, but he must stay in town and report to the police every day. That night in the hotel, Lee apologizes to Yuan and they get naughty. Meanwhile, Ho is shocked to see Fukang arrive in a police uniform and enter the station. She immediately sends her men to capture him, but the guy is genuinely confused. He tells them all his personal information, confirming he's just a normal cop. Ho realizes that Lee saw him when they took him out of prison and used his description to lie during the story. It turns out there's no song. Lee was the painter all along. The woman who came to rescue him wasn't the real Yuan, it was Cao Qing. When Lee took her to the hospital to heal her burns, he asked the surgeons to make her look like his ex. Lee's letter had been for her and included a portrait of her original face. Cao Qing was the one who kidnapped Yuan and her fiancé, saying that if she had to replace Yuan, the real one had to die. Lee survived the shootout thanks to a bulletproof vest and stabbed Hua. It was Cao Qing he saw on the street when he was arrested. Now, Lee and Cao Qing escape from the country on a boat. However, Cao Qing becomes tired of being Yuan's replacement because Lee will never love the real her. She calls the police and soon they're surrounded. The boat also has a bomb and Cao Qing detonates it, so they both die in front of the cops. Sometime later, Ho finds the real Yuan and tells her that her fiancé's killer is dead. While showing her a picture of Lee, Yuan reveals that Lee had been a creepy neighbor obsessed with her, so their relationship had also been a lie. He entered the forging business hoping to win her over. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this.